Welcome to Arcade Attack. A retro gaming podcast for up to 4 players.
Sonic Boom!
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good night, whatever, wherever you are in the world listening to us. It's another Arcade Attack podcast for you, for your listening pleasure.
Free of charge, man.
Indeed. Oh, free.
Yeah,
Free. And you'll notice that I'm joined by at least one person. Well, the usual rabble, of course it is. And joining me, only what can be described as the tastiest biscuit selection pack, if in fact most of them had been eaten. Oh. I have
stale now.
I've got the dashing Dylan.
I'm the Bourbon.
You're the Bourbon. I've got the amazing Adrian. What biscuit are you?
Cream, I guess.
Custard cream, classic.
Yeah.
And the captivating Keith.
Oh, wow.
What biscuit are you, sir?
I'd have to be a hobnob.
Yes! They're like Marines.
I just thought he's more of a jammy dodger.
And
But, yeah.
jammy
I've been called that before.
Yeah.
hobnobs just drink all your tea. That's what Peter Kay says.
Well,
isn't it?
I do that
It's
as well.
true. So more bigging up than you deserve, but anyway, let's move on, shall we? How are we, chaps? How are we doing?
Very good.
Yeah? We good? Still revved up and ready to go?
Fresh and full
After
of
the
sugar.
day's festivity.
Yeah.
Full of sugar.
Full of sugar, a lot of sugar.
Thanks to Lidl's knockoff Haribo.
Thank you.
Yeah, amazing. So, we've got to move on to the task of working out what today's podcast is all about. And as per my usual MO, I've got some really cringeworthy punnery to throw at you. See if you can guess what it is before I tell you. You might like today's pod, but don't shoot me down if you don't. I'm sure we can all look at it from a first-person perspective and still have enough ammunition in the can to get to the end. You've guessed it. Have you guessed it? What's today's pod all about? If you hadn't guessed it, RPGs. Puzzle games.
More like BFGs.
Ooh, good one. Oh, deal's on it, mate.
I didn't even prepare that.
No.
That was just off the cuff.
This is good, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is good. I mean, I don't blame anybody if they haven't guessed it because the punnery was awful. But we're going to have a look at first-person shooters, FPS. Through the ages, gentlemen, through the ages. So we're going to look at it from the start, from the very seedlings of where it came from. And we're going to go right up to today. Now, for those that are up to date with our pods, firstly, they're all amazing, the listeners. Yeah. Recently managed to bag top spot in Croatia. Whoop, whoop.
That's true, though.
They love us over there.
When we had second place the week before. So yes, get in. And you'll know that we've covered the guys that are up to date. You'll know that we've covered legacy of both multiplayer and RTS games as well, which I had really great fun doing. And we had some really good discussion online after that about some of the titles and loads of stuff. You know, LAN parties and just some of the hardware we were trying to run it on that couldn't run it. And those were the days, I'll tell you. And also, the impact they had on the gaming scene, some of the influential titles as well, some of the big names, and some of the smaller names as well, maybe that we played that kind of didn't take off, but we enjoyed. So today's podcast is really no different, apart from the fact that I'll be covering probably, I would say, the most played and widely released game type in gaming history, I would say. I would say
maybe that's a fair shout.
It's FPS is everywhere. Yeah. It's a rinsed genre, shall we say. Yeah. But I mean, what any other genres maybe could take that crown? You know, is there anything that's as far-reaching?
As much as an FPS.
I was thinking maybe open world RPGs.
Open world RPG.
MMORPG RPGs.
Yeah. Yeah. But I would that would have been my knee jerk. Would have been RPGs,
or sports games. If you know,
I suppose sports games.
That,
Yeah, I suppose sports. You could even argue maybe even bigger, potentially.
Yeah.
Because they're just non-stop, aren't they? Every year, you're going to get the usual Maddens, FIFAs, and what have you, NHLs and all that sort of thing. So the other part of those past legacy pods involved a bit of a step back, obviously way back in time, because we have to see where it starts. You know, you don't get all of the stuff you get now from thin air.
Nope.
Obviously,
Right,
it develops from a bedrock. So we have to go back to sort of the earliest days of the genre. So, Dill, I'll ask you a favour. Would you kindly fire up the old time machine
You got
and send us back whooshing sounds?
It's there's a part missing because we go. Woo!
Shake the table.
Bang!
You know when your Hoover's about to blow up.
Just imagine if someone tunes in at that moment. They press
some
it
of
there.
it.
I'll just skip the intro.
My Hoover's broke.
It sounds like, Chewie's out up to no good, isn't he?
Chewbacca. Yeah.
Dear, oh dearie me.
We've flown back to what year have we gone though?
Well, whilst we're in the time machine, waiting for us to go through our warp tunnel, I need to do my little disclaimer. So as usual, there's going to be games or people that maybe I don't mention, or maybe don't give enough of the spotlight to, because there's always somebody that says, you didn't talk about this enough, or you didn't, this was better than...
Doom 2 is better than Doom 3.
So, if that's the case, and you get the hump, fight me. Or just moan at me on the socials and we can have a chat there, yeah? But yeah, honestly though, if there's
Doom 2
anything...
is actually better than Doom 3, I'll just add that in. Sorry,
we'll come to that. Don't worry, you'll have your soapbox.
Thanks.
Don't worry. But yeah, honestly, if there's any gripes or humps or big ups or anything like that you want to do for any of the titles or any of the people, anything at all, just shout us up. Yeah, post us, tag us in on a post, and we'll have a chat and we'll kind of mull it over. Now, with the thread of the pod being, of course, FPS games, you would think that our time machine would be taking us back to the early 90s, right?
Correct.
Wrong again. So where do we need to go back to, I hear you ask? We are going back to good old 1973.
That's what?
We are indeed. And I do this every
it's always
time.
the same.
And it surprises me when I research it, and it surprises you when I say it, and you think, hang about, there is no way there was an FPS in 1973. Well, we'll find out, won't we? Yeah. So there's no easy way to put this, chaps. 1973 was 50 years ago. 73, yeah? Mm-hmm. Let's move on. Yep. It was the year when The Exorcist debuted on the big screen and, shall we say, made more than a few waves at cinemas. Mm-hmm. Yeah, scared the absolute pants off most people. And I think, if I remember correctly, seeing there's actually reaction videos and stuff. Like there's footage of, grainy footage of people just leaving the cinema because, they didn't want it. Kojak was popular on TV.
Nice.
Yeah. Tie a yellow ribbon round the old oak tree was a big song, massive hit. And, I didn't know this, the very first cellular mobile phone call was placed.
Wow.
1973.
Years ago.
We all assume it's the 80s because of the big blocky phones. No, in fact, the first call was 73, which I think is quite impressive, actually. Funnily enough, it was also the year the very first first-person shooter game came into existence. Now, for some AA points and a handful of Lidl-style Haribo, which are available anyway, so you can just take some, not really a prize, does anybody know or hazard a guess at the name of the first documented FPS game?
Oh, you know what? I think I might have looked.
Adrian's waving his hand, so I'll come to him last because I think he knows.
Yeah, it's ringing a bell. I don't think you did much. Like, obviously, you went through corridors and stuff and didn't do much. But what?
You're on the right lines. Yes.
Yeah. What is it?
Age?
Well, I did interview someone that some people argued made the first FPS game. A certain Ed Rotberg who made Battlezone. No,
Wrong.
No, it was something.
Sorry,
else.
he did make Battlezone.
Yeah.
Tank one, isn't it?
But in fact, and I will come to Battlezone because it deserves its place in obviously the Hall of Fame of FPS games and gaming in general. So that has its own little section. It was actually developed by two guys called Greg Thompson and Steve Colley, and they were students who were doing a NASA work study program. So they were actually studying, and at the same time of studying, they had to do, coursework and work, etc., and work on systems. And this was one of their pieces of work. So what they wanted to do, they wanted to visualize fluid dynamics for spacecraft, i.e. moving images and things like that on the computer. So if you haven't seen this running, it's actually called Maze War.
Maze War.
Ring a bell?
Yes.
Rang a bell for me, and I was like, okay, I don't know whether I've seen it or not. I looked up the footage. I have seen it. And if you haven't seen it running, just think straight green lines.
You're just basically going through a corridor maze, aren't you?
Correct. Forming, basic walls and blocks which move closer as you walk, around the maze. As you would expect, very basic, but has kind of a cool feel to it, knowing that it's like the original. And when you watch it, it's very, it's quite, I don't know, it's different to kind of any other old game footage that you see because it's so damn basic. Mm-hmm. It's quite cool the way it looks. But there was a design later on that actually included a 2-player version where you had to shoot your opponent to win.
Nice.
So the movement essentially of the what we know as the FPS games of modern FPS games, the movement of going forward, turning corridors, looking around, etc., was born with Maze War, and then the development slightly later to include shooting your opponent to win. Again, horrendously basic, but it gave them the idea of the fluidity of movement, you see, which is exactly what they wanted. It was also further expanded later, could actually run 8 players, and it had AI bots, customizable maps, online scoreboards, and a spectator mode as well.
That's pretty impressive.
That is really
Which,
cool.
when you, again, we're still in the 70s here, we're still in the mid-70s, that's a hell of an achievement, because all of those things there you take for granted on a modern kind of multiplayer game, a FPS game, but not for a game in the 70s when you think about it. So another very, very early, and this was the year after, another FPS iteration was called Spasm, Spasim. It used the same basis of movement, but it presented more as kind of a basic space flight simulator. So you had to
Space Sim.
Spasim.
Space sim,
Simulator.
yeah, whichever, yeah. I didn't think of it like that. That's really cool, actually.
I think you're saying spasm.
Yes, I've read it as spasm. Yeah, space sim. Keith gets the points on the back, and there's a handful of Haribo. Excellent. But yeah, this was if you look at the footage, it's very different because you're essentially like flying into shapes and like docking ports and stuff. Again, I can imagine it was very helpful for like the space program and flight and things like that because it actually visualized you could model flying into certain areas and docking up and all this sort of stuff. So very clever. Both of the games used a kind of tile to tile movement engine, and that allowed players to move a space or a tile at a time, essentially, although it looked a bit more fluid than that because of the way they kind of engineered it. And you could only turn 90 degrees at any one time. So left, right, and that was it, basically. So you had no free movement. So for anyone thinking that this is kind of anything like approaching a modern FPS, it really is not. It was the very early bare bones of, yeah. But the important thing to remember is that this groundbreaking coding sort of opened the door to what would become one of, if not the biggest genres. And at the time, obviously, nobody knew that. So yeah. I mean, if you think about what was around in the mid to late 70s arcade wise.
Space Invaders, Pac-Man,
Centipede, thing like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Atari Classics, those types of games. And they were all, platform or, single screen games or, there was nothing that was a first person viewpoint. So this was very, very different. So where do we go from the first kind of seedlings of the genre? When was the the first title to really grab the headlines? Because Maze War and Space Sim.
They weren't really for the public.
I'm getting the hang of it. Well, no, not really. This is the thing. They were, they're little known kind of experiments, really. And they had a very limited kind of release, if you can call it a release at all. And it was only really meant for kind of educational purposes and so on and so forth. But a lot of people document it as, the seedling of FPS. So after those two, we saw a few more titles which came out of the woodwork with the basic concepts. There was something called, I can't even pronounce this, Akalabeth, World of Doom. Yeah. Ooh. There's a trigger word. Yeah. And a game called Way Out. And they actually use ray casting, which was similar to ray tracing, which uses light to display visual angles and shapes.
Nice.
Which, as you can imagine, brought a bit of a new dimension to the visuals, yeah? They also allowed players to free move around the maps they were on. So we're talking some big strides forward. It wasn't, in fact, until a whole 7 years, though, after Maze War, that we saw the first commercially successful arcade-based first-person shooter with the amazing
Battlezone.
Yes, in 1980.
That name again?
Battlezone.
One more time for dramatic effect.
Battlezone.
It was indeed Battlezone. And now, Age, I know you've had the absolute pleasure of interviewing the creator, the father of Battlezone, Mr. Ed Rockberg, in a previous podcast. Well worth checking out, by the way, because if you think again, if you enjoy video game history in terms of where it came from, where it started, and actually how people back then, how engineers and devs used to be able to create stuff from like nothing using the technology. It's a really, really good interview, but he shares kind of a lot of the creative process and the opportunities around it, etc. But I mean, just give us a flavour of like, you know, his thoughts around essentially, you know, did he know he was creating the, you know, one of the absolute classics?
When I interviewed him, he said, little disclaimer, if I have to end the podcast early, it's because my house might be burning down. He was... there was the forest fires in California a couple of years ago, and I think he spoke about this on the interview. So I'm really sorry if you see smoke on my screen. It's
I gotta go.
That's unbelievable.
I gotta go. He was really good, actually, really humble, and he was very proud of obviously working on Battlezone. I think it led to a lot of opportunities, actually. So eventually, he worked. He was linked to Polybius, wasn't he, as well? I don't want to go off beaten track.
Because
he actually worked on a sort of update of Battlezone for the US Army, a secret arcade machine, not really for punters. And he kind of explains how he was forced by Atari to work on that. He really didn't want to do that. And that kind of link, his name's been linked since then to Polybius because it's kind of a US government-based machine. So the Battlezone stuff was really interesting. But for me, the highlight was talking about the kind of other stuff afterwards. Battlezone's great, and there's an updated version, isn't there, Keith?
There is. There's a VR version of it, which is really good fun as well. So it's still the same kind of wireframe graphics.
Love it.
You're in the cockpit of the tank, and it's very cool. Very cool.
He was a really nice guy. I tried to tag him into Twitter once to say, oh, you know, check out this. But he's been banned from Twitter. So I don't know what you did, Ed, on Twitter. I hope you're all right, but he's been banned.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Well,
I don't think it's difficult to pee off a certain Mr. Musk these days.
No,
so
that's true.
He doesn't like Battlezone, does he? I bet he lost.
he hates Battlezone.
He got defeated in Battlezone
Yeah,
VR.
probably.
You killed him, Keith.
Yeah, it was me.
Had a big strop.
Ed killed him in Battlezone, and now he's deleted his account. But no, a fantastic interview, and it, you know, talking about all the inner workings of a game like that, that's kind of started a whole, effectively, you know, the first commercially successful game as well. And it really was successful. It was a big hit in the arcades. I think I used to have a version of it on the Amstrad. I think I had I think it must have been a much later ported version, in the sort of mid 80s, I think it was. But it was really cool. It was really cool because you could move around, you know, shoot tanks. I mean, like, couldn't do that before. It was mad. So there we are. Battlezone indeed. So, but what, you know, what did the 80s bring in terms of other titles and moves forward for FPS games? So we only had to go 1 year further forward to 1981, and we had a game by Midway. We all know Midway. Mm-hmm. Wizard of War, and War spelt WOR.
I've definitely heard of it.
Now, this is a bit of a cop-out, this one. However, it's kind of considered influential. Mm-hmm. So this Wizard of War is more, it features more of a bird's eye view of a map, like a Pac-Man style maze. It doesn't resemble FPS directly, but a lot of sort of industry experts and devs previously have said that it's likened in terms of its style to a modern style shooter, to the way you navigate and shoot the monsters and things and the objectives and stuff like that. So I think the idea of kind of the mechanics of shooting and moving were kind of possibly imagined on that, and then the first person view was used off the back of it. So because you've probably got to imagine that with a first person game, you've got to do an overhead anyway, because you've got to know how the map's laid out, you know, how it looks, where you go, you know, which corner you turn around, where the enemies are going to appear. So I think they maybe drew a bit of inspiration from that. So similar to that in look and feel was Muse Software's Castle Wolfenstein. Does anyone remember the first Castle Wolfenstein?
Keith,
I don't remember it, but we did a Wolfenstein podcast years ago where we talked about the development of that, and obviously that wasn't a first-person game. But again,
No, it wasn't.
the elements of what would later become Wolfenstein 3D.
Yes.
which I'm sure you'll go on to talk about.
Oh, I might mention it. I might mention it.
Kind of important.
I might mention it, but yeah, it was that was one of the first kind of big names to sort of make its way out. But yeah, it wasn't an FPS initially. And funnily enough, as we go through a lot of these games, you'll find that some of the big names, they didn't start out as FPS games. Oddly enough,
Duke Nukem, for example.
well, there we are.
Yep.
Yes, and that has its own soapbox and all. So you'll have to wait for that one. It's worth mentioning this one. Taito actually made a game called Gunbuster in the arcades, and it was rather tricky to control because in the one hand you had a joystick, and the other hand you had a light gun. Yeah, so you can imagine. It was.
That sounds cool.
Yeah, it sounds cool, but
it's like the Lucky and Wild arcade machine because
Yeah.
the steering wheel and the gun. That's cool.
Have you ever done one player on that where you steer and you shoot? It's so cool.
there was. I think that reminds me of. There's like world's wildest police chases on like the PS1 or something, and one player controls the person shooting out the window, and the other's driving. It's mad, but it's. I think it's pretty much the same for that. You've got to be quite adept at kind of
do
joysticking
both.
and light gunning at the same time. So that was Gunbuster, which I don't think was. I think was a major success in Japan, but not sure it sort of made it much elsewhere. Hence why you may have not have heard it. But you needed to be pretty adept to make the most out of your quarter or your 10p then, or whatever they were using in Japan at the time in terms of a coin that went in an arcade machine. So that was in fact the first free roaming sprite based FPS, and that hit arcades in '88. So if you think about it, we've moved on quite a bit. We're 15 years past Maze War, and we've only just got to sprite based. But as you can imagine, things pick up rather rapidly from here. So I have got some other I've got some other notable titles from the 80s. For the genre, which either use a full or a part FPS framework. There's one called MIDI Maze from Atari. There was one called Faceball 2000.
Oh, I've seen that. That was on the SNES.
Faceball
Yeah,
2000.
terrible.
What a title. In fact, they OneUp.com called the first multiplayer 3D shooter and major LAN action game, which was MIDI Maze and Faceball 2000. So, you know, I don't know quite what they did, but they must have done something right, I suppose there. But looking back at the 80s, the genre, to be fair, let's be honest, very slow to get going. What was kind of king of the castles, you know, back in the sort of late 80s, gaming wise, genre wise? What was really kind
Arcade
running the tills? Beat 'em ups were huge.
Racing
Beat 'em
games.
ups, platformers.
Yeah,
that
and
kind of shit.
platformers massive, you know, just non-stop conveyor belt of platformers. And obviously a lot of brands and a lot of franchises coming out in terms of on the platformers, your Marios and so on and so forth. So when you think about it, the FPS as a genre really hadn't got going at all. It was still really struggling and took a long time to catch up with the rest of gaming. When you think about when you think about it, you just think FPS is one of those all-encompassing genres, don't you? But actually it took a long time to get going. So, I mean, the titles I've just listed above, apart from maybe a few smaller ones, are the only fully developed FPS games that were about. There are other few smaller titles, some that people are going to go, you didn't mention this. But, you know, again, we're talking commercially successful ones that would have been in kind of all arcades and most people's houses and stuff. But that was until we very gently dip our toes into the swimming pool that was the 1990s, gentlemen. Now, before we get carried away with all of the titles that we know and love from the 90s. I know you're itching to say a few. It is worth giving some credit to some of the early 90s titles that sort of paved the way. You may have heard of some, you may not. So we've got in 1991, we saw Hover Tank 3D. Anyone heard of Hover Tank 3D? Check it out. It's actually quite impressive. It developed the raycasting technology, which improved on the versions, which were used in earlier games, and it gave them a real sense of the light and angles more so. So it kind of developed it a lot more. It's quite an impressive looking game for the time. I say the time. I mean, what we're talking 32 years ago. Oh, that hurts to say that. But yeah, it's pretty impressive for what it is. We've then got, following shortly after that, we've got ID Software's Catacomb 3D. No? I'm stumping you here, aren't I? Catacomb 3D, another impressive looking game.
Software.
Yeah. From id, yeah. Which introduced another tech development. This was texture mapping this time, which again was a was a big issue. And that actually, instead of having like a pre-rendered, just a fixed environment, the computer actually, the software drew what the player was looking at. Mm-hmm. So you actually had almost a bespoke viewpoint of what you were looking at, which changed the game, yet again, rather than just having a set world around them. Another title release, was Ultimate Underworld, the Stygian Abyss from 92. And again, used what's considered one of the most advanced graphics engines up till that point. Mm-hmm. So it was now starting to kind of push the boundaries a bit. But because we've not heard of many of these games, you're thinking, hang about, were they big successes? No, in fact, they weren't. They were releases. Some of them did all right. Some of them did quite well, but they weren't runaway successes. They didn't kind of capture the market. FPS still hadn't kind of taken the reins, as it were, of the horses and basically run away with it. Mm. So it's worth mentioning something though, before we go any further, that happened in 1990, with a chap you might have heard of called John Romero. And where was he a software developer?
In id Software.
In id Software, indeed. He learned about this new texture mapping style. He was on a phone call with a chap called Paul Neurath. And he described it to his programmer, who the name would have definitely come up, which was John Carmack.
Yeah.
And he described it to John and said, look, this is what it does. This is what it is. This is how it runs. This is how it looks. This is what I've heard. And John's reply was, I can do that. So what happened next?
All I know is that John Carmack is probably the smartest man I've ever heard about in video games. He can do anything, it seems. Mm-hmm. The stories I've heard from people who say, he did it in a weekend. He got Doom working on Jagger in a weekend. He said, I couldn't have done that, but John Carmack could. I tried to approach him once for an interview, and he said, look, he did reply back. He said, look, go through, I think he's proper high up now in Google or something, or maybe Apple. I don't know, but he said, you have to go through these channels, but I don't wish, I doubt you're going to get much luck with it, sadly, sorry. But he's smart as, I tell you.
Listen, you don't ask, you don't get. At the end of the day, you got to.
Hey, he still replied to me.
Yeah, but look, at the end of the day, look at all the interviews you've had. I mean, it's a great collection of people. But I mean, to kind of bring it back. I mean, he heard what John had to say, and I think, given the limitations of kind of hardware software at the time, most people would have gone, oh, that sounds quite tricky, to have all these kind of textured environments and different lighting and.
It had to be a PC game, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, and sort of. Would have put most people off of actually taking on the risk. But what did happen next? So we dive
What's
headlong.
Doom before?
Oh, you're going to find out.
Wolfenstein 3D.
Ooh, Keith's shaking his head, telling you off.
Wolfenstein 3D was for.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Dylan wasn't at the recording of the Wolfenstein podcast.
Oh!
I believe he was having a baby.
I was having a baby.
So he gets
okay, all right. I'll let you off that one then. Okay. But we go diving.
Well, I was right. I was like, no, I think Wolfenstein 3D before. Yeah.
But yeah, with that, good little segue as usual. We go diving headfirst into 1992. And this is a title that's been credited as being the very first modern iteration of the FPS genre. Mm. So obviously we've got all of the kind of stuff that went before it. And I don't want to kind of throw any shade or throw any mud over the fence, but they were either limited releases or limited success if they were releases. And you'll have people that love some of those games and etc. But this was the first time that it was kind of the full package was all together in regards to an FPS game. It is by id Software. Again, it's got guns, Nazis, loads of action. What is it? Dale, go on.
Wolfenstein 3D.
It is Wolfenstein 3D. Not to be confused with Castle Wolfenstein, as Keith rightly pointed out, which is a platformer. So there, again, the first, fully packaged modern FPS was, in fact, initially from a platforming game, yeah? It used the previously developed raycasting tech, but it gave a new look and feel to the gameplay. So it was quite a bright game.
It's quite colourful. And...
Yep, there was quite a good reason for that, because they couldn't actually differentiate between light and dark areas at the time. So it was a case that they had to kind of work with what they had. The text, don't get me wrong, the textures and kind of the way it appears is very impressive for the time. The only thing that kind of crossed my mind when I was looking at this was, do we think that if FPS had kind of got going a bit earlier, do we think that it would look would have looked different in the early 90s? Do you think that they would have been further ahead at that point in time when Wolfenstein 3D came out? I mean, because if you look at some other genres, they really, came on in strength to strength. As soon as you had a kind of an initial seedling, it grew really quickly. Whereas FPS took a while.
FPS games
20 years.
Can't really be used or couldn't really translate very well to arcade games. Arcade games equal money. Therefore, you put your money into the genres that make money.
That's a fair shout.
Same for the home console market as well. The 16-bit machines weren't really powerful enough.
No,
that's a fair
So
shout.
again, the money was to be made on your platform games.
They're easier. Cookie cutter style, isn't it?
So we think it was more of the kind of tech wasn't there to support the experience.
Yeah.
And the experience would have been a bit.
I blame John Carmack. He should have done it years ago.
Oh, John, you're not as good as you say you are.
Had they been able to do it well on like 8 and 16-bit consoles, I'm sure the money would have been poured into it then. But at the time, it wasn't. Was it?
I'd say it's, but maybe it wasn't born out of, it was born out of the fact that the hardware was getting better rather than the fact that it wasn't advances in the software or industry or whatever. That's a fair shout. But what do we think about Wolfenstein 3D? We've all played it, presumably. Yeah. What do we think about it as a game kind of then when you first played it and maybe now? Thoughts?
hasn't aged as well as Doom. I don't think
It hasn't, no. But did you enjoy it when you played it?
Yeah.
Do you still dip in now and then? Yeah.
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 I liked what I loved about the boat most was there's hidden rooms and secret areas.
Yes, indeed.
I loved exploring it. I remember and I loved that playing Wolfenstein for the first time, looking around, pressing space bar on all these walls, hoping they're open up, and the final boss, I still remember it. It's like Adolf Hitler in a massive mech suit, wasn't it? It's absolutely incredible. Quite scary, but so colourful. It shouldn't really. The colours are a bit not jarring. That's not the right word, but it doesn't really quite. The later Wolfensteins are a bit more gloomy. Let's be honest.
Yeah, it didn't reflect kind of the mood, basically.
Very fun game.
But that's because of, as I said before, this whole ray casting situation was they developed it to a point, but it couldn't differentiate light and dark areas, and it couldn't actually show you, when there was like I think there's big candlesticks, isn't there, and things like that. They're all the same.
Yeah, like the torches and stuff on the walls.
Yeah. They're all effectively the same brightness, which was one of the downsides. It is worth mentioning that Wolfenstein 3D was very, very close to receiving a lot of criticism, obviously around its violent content and subject matter. Mm-hmm. But due to another title released shortly afterwards, which we'll come on to in a moment, it actually avoided quite a lot of criticism, to be fair, because it was shifted to this other title. Mm-hmm. It was, however, banned in Germany. No surprises there, due to its use of Nazi symbolism. Yeah. You can't really explain that one away when the final boss, as we've said, is Hitler in a massive mech suit, which is about as unsubtle as you can make it. Thankfully, the world's moved on a bit since then, and we can kind of look back and realise that it is a work of fiction. So, but yeah, so we've basically kind of plopped Wolfenstein 3D on the map. I like it. I think it's a funky game. I think the sounds are quite cool. And yeah, it's clunky. It's quite bright. It looks a bit weird and like colourful, but
still good fun.
Yeah, it is good fun. I think it really is. But it kind of was the little brother, the prerequisite, the kind of understudy, as we've probably always said. Let's say, or we could say that Wolfenstein was the grandfather of modern FPS. What was the daddy of them?
Well, can I just chip in?
Go on then,
because my computer, my first PC, could play Wolfenstein, but it wasn't powerful enough to play Doom.
Yeah.
If I wanted to play Doom, I played it on a postage stamp size screen, like zoomed down, and I could just about play it, and I had to go right close to the monitor. It was no go. So I do remember my PC could play Wolfenstein 3D style games.
Excellent.
So just before I got a better PC, about a year after Doom had come out, my uncle came over one day and said, "Oh, I know you can't play Doom, but I got you this." And he gave me this game. I'll never forget it. And it's not even that good, but it's called Corridor 7. I bet that's not on your list.
No, it's not.
Corridor 7. It was a space shooter, an FPS game, basically Wolfenstein graphics, but with aliens and stuff. And it was colourful and a bit silly, but because I had Doom envy, I was like, well, this is better than nothing. And I actually quite enjoyed it. Corridor 7.
Good shout.
It hasn't aged well. I've done some I thought maybe I could review this game, actually. I played it again recently. I bought like a pack of these old games for like £2 on Steam, and it's really bad. But I just want to have a little shout out to some of the underdogs. Corridor 7. There was another game as well called Body Count.
Yes, yep. I have.
That's kind of in between Wolfenstein and Doom.
Yeah,
So,
it is.
and I think there was another game, I can't remember what it's called now, but I remember playing a few FPS games around that time before I got my proper itch with Doom or even Duke Nukem 3D. But I just want to shout out the kind of more obscure.
No, that's a great shout, because actually there's and it's well worth checking out. And I had a look at this list as well. There's quite a comprehensive list. You guys know the fandom websites. They basically have fan wiki on everything you can imagine: TV shows, games, everything. And they have a comprehensive list in year order of FPS games, early FPS games, which goes up. It only goes up to about 99, I think. But there's like 150 or what on there. But I definitely remember Body Count being on that list, and I don't remember Corridor 7, but it would almost certainly have been on there. But if I miss any out, go and check that list out on fandom, and literally, I mean, if you go to Google and just type in FPS games, 90s FPS games, it comes up with that list. So well worth checking out there, because then you can see if your favourite is on the list. So yeah, Wolfenstein 3D. I mean, it's got its place, but again, we know that obviously the big title, we've just said it, is Doom. Anyone know when it released?
93?
It was 93. Do you know what? Have a guess at the month?
November.
Oh, December. It was December 93. And it was actually one of the first games to be released via a shareware distribution. Mm-hmm. Anyone want to explain what shareware is?
I know that it was like, so Doom, there's 3 big chapters, and each chapter had maybe about 10 or so levels. And you could buy the shareware of like chapter 1 very cheaply, maybe for like £5. And after you finish that shareware, it says, well, make sure you get, if you want the full experience, buy the full game. Very clever way. It wasn't a demo. It wasn't a full game. No. It was in between. Mm-hmm. And I think
try before you buy.
It was try before you buy. And I remember getting quite a few of those. And I think I got a shareware version of Rise.
Wolfenstein might have been.
Yeah.
Wolfenstein
that's right.
was as well when it came out.
Rise of the Triads. I don't know if you're going to mention that game.
I am.
That I think I got that initially on shareware, and I think John Bitton, the lucky scoundrel, he got the full version. So I had the shareware version. He had the full one.
Oh my goodness me! I'll come on to that in a minute. But he was like, he had a bank of FPS games. He was like, yeah, he's like a library, that boy.
Look at that! I'm just showing Keith for the Corridor 7.
Corridor 7.
It's rare. Corridor 7 Alien Invasion is a first-person shooter video game developed by Capstone Software and published by Intracorp and GameTech. The game received poor reception, largely due to its outdated technology. Yeah.
Well, this is again another nice segue, because this is the difference.
Outdated. You use outdated Wolfenstein 3D engine. Oh yeah, it can still work.
This is the thing. It changed so quickly, because within a year, Wolfenstein was effectively seen as outdated. Unfortunately,
that's true.
Because Doom came in and had made.
Wait, when did Doom come in again? 94?
93. December 93.
This came in March 94. Corridor 7.
Yeah, that's why they.
So they were using the. So there you go. That kind of explains it then.
Funny,
but yeah, the most important part of Doom versus Wolfenstein in terms of moves forward was the use of more in-depth graphics, lighting, variations in level and heights, which was a big change, because in Wolfenstein it was one level. Flat. It was flat, corridors, etc. Whereas Doom, you have stairs, you can drop down, you can climb up, etc.
You can't move your gun around, can you? You can't.
No, so it was horizontal aiming, which is what they what the industry likes to kind of label it as. It's only horizontal aiming, so left and right, etc. Funny thing was though, in Doom, if you remember correctly, you could actually fire at enemies that were quite high up the screen by aiming along the line. Mm-hmm. So if you drew a vertical line on the screen. And you had an enemy that was on that line, even though your gun was pointing way underneath.
Oh yeah, went straight up.
You'd still shoot them. Yeah,
you know those cartoons where they twist the shotgun up.
Yeah.
It's almost like one of those shotguns. There's no better sound in video games than the shotgun in Doom.
Well, which one?
I want to say the double shotgun.
Oh, that wasn't in Doom.
Doom 2.
I want to say the shotgun in Doom.
So you've got the pump action. The pump action. So cool. The double barrel didn't make the super shotgun didn't make an appearance until number 2.
Okay.
So hold your horses. But this was there was a lot of other complexity as well. The enemies looked different. They moved differently. Projectiles, the projectiles being shot at you were very different. You had fireballs like plasma balls and bullets from obviously the normal sort of zombie soldiers type thing. It was a very different affair, but it used a lot of these differences to its advantage. And a lot of people have credited it hugely by for giving them a more immersive experience. You could go through dark corridors, for example. There was light differences. You could have flickering candles or lights on in the distance. And the audio took a big step forward as well. You had different enemies making different noises. And quite unnerving, to be fair, when you go into some of the levels and they're going, and you're like, what is that? So yeah, very much a move forward with Doom. Much more depth, much more varying audio, and obviously the graphics were a big step up as well. Personal favourite weapon in Doom, gentlemen?
Shotgun / chainsaw.
Okay,
the
Adrian's...
minigun, obviously.
Yeah, the chain gun.
Say that, yeah, the
Chain gun.
yeah.
I love the chainsaw, just for its hilarity.
Oh, they chainsaw.
Because the fact that if you keep it going, the enemy can't attack you because they're recoiling from every hit.
Yeah.
So it's not very powerful, but you can get them. But once again, due to the fact that he's just so damn good at getting such big names onto the pods, he's sitting there blushing. But Adrian, you interviewed American McGee, did you not?
Real interesting guy.
Yeah.
One of my favourite interviews, I'd
really
say.
good interview.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, honestly, I didn't do any work really. He did all of it. He gave some great stories, really honest. And the story of how he got into the video game industry and working with id Software was so fascinating, in my opinion. And I loved hearing how he had tough upbringing, tough life, and he kind of, he out of nowhere he got this opportunity and he took it.
Yeah. I mean, he gave some really good insights as well, and actually, I think it was quite good to hear a bit of a warts and all type story as well. Because you can rose tint a lot of that
he's
stuff.
Very honest, wasn't he?
Yeah, which I think's nice. And people kind of appreciate that when you're truthful rather than just saying, "Oh, it was all great. We were all mates. We got on so well. Yeah, I did this in a week and it was great." But it's much better when it's a bit more raw. So, but he worked obviously on the first Doom game and later on Ultimate Doom as well. But he had a bit of a whirlwind time at id, didn't he, Adrian? So
he did.
But I mean, best thing to do if you want to hear all about it, the interviews, it's all available, isn't it? So
yeah, and sadly, it's been just announced that his project, his latest Alice title, which he's had a lot in the pipeline, a lot of funding, has been. I think EA have not given the rights to him, so it's been.
I think that
canned.
was last month or something.
Yeah, really sad
Yeah.
news, and I really think he's a very passionate man. If you're really passionate about something, and there is people want this Alice game, so EA, I know we love you on Arcade Attack, but
God, we really hate EA, don't we?
sort it
we
out,
don't
guys.
mind. We don't mind Electronic Arts, but we don't like EA.
No, it's true. That's
that's
the
fair,
difference.
That's a fair assessment. But I mean, if you want to listen to all that great stuff, you do go and have a listen to it because, as Keith says, it's a fantastic interview. Lots of insight, loads of stories, especially if you're interested in these types of games and the development stuff. So just, moving back slightly to Doom's creator, John Romero, he actually wanted to bring in a deathmatch concept. And Adrian, I know you might have a little story about two computers in your house. One of them didn't run it very well. But the concept, he wanted to make it feel like a competitive multiplayer nature. And he wanted to kind of echo the competitiveness of the of games like Street Fighter 2 and Fatal Fury. So even though very different style of game, he wanted that kind of edge of your seat competitiveness where you're running around essentially trying to get one up on your mate or mates or brothers or whatever. And it was thought that it would take Doom in a new direction and be, a lot more popular among gamers looking to play with friends across LAN, which, thanks to, I would say, mainly RTS games coming up through the ranks, which were exploding at this time. Yeah. LAN parties.
Unintended.
Yeah. LAN parties were becoming a real thing. They weren't just kind of geeks in basements. This was, a lot of people were doing it. So, FPS was throwing their hat into the ring with Doom deathmatch style multiplayer gaming. But little did he know, the rest of the team, just how popular that would kind of be and what kind of doors that would open. Because if you think about jumping forward to now, I can't even think about how many games there are that have online multiplayer deathmatch modes. It's just ridiculous. Yeah. But it engaged so many people to play Doom and jump on that bandwagon. It actually started to cause some major issues within companies and their networks because so many people were online at once. It was causing frequent bandwidth restrictions. I mean, if you're the boss of a company, like, what have you been doing all day? Playing Doom?
Well,
sorry, boss.
we mentioned it. Me and Dylan did a Doom pod, didn't we, a while ago? And I think it's the only video game mentioned in Friends, isn't it? I think
It is. Yeah, Chandler's playing it on his little laptop, dear.
Awesome.
It could do this, and this. What are you going to do with it? Probably play Doom.
I mean, we've talked about these a number of times in past pods, but there's people that have got Doom running on like an Epson printer screen.
The fridge. Yeah, we
the
get
fridge. What was the
now.
What was the other? ZX Spectrum, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Doom on the ZX.
Actually, that one's all right.
Do you remember I almost got banned from Twitter, from Reddit for that account. It runs
yeah.
on Doom. Do you remember the mods? They weren't happy at me.
Mate, those
We
mods.
wouldn't normally allow that.
We don't normally allow that. Yeah,
Basically, I shared my interview with I forget his name now, the Jaguar guy. For goodness sake, but he spoke. He spoke about how John Carmack got Doom on the Jaguar. And I said, "Well,
it wasn't James Hampton, was it?
What?
Was it James Hampton? He did AVP.
No, that's
didn't he?
AV. That's Alien vs Predator.
Jaguar guy.
Jaguar producer. Oh, it'll come to us maybe. But my point is, that Reddit, they don't like me over there when it runs Doom.
Oh, Adrian, causing problems again. Well, despite Doom's critical and commercial success, it did draw a fair bit of controversy, actually, funnily enough. Many religious groups condemned the violence, and some reviewers actually labelled it
because there's no violence in religion, is there?
No, not at all. No, I mean you can't see the irony there whatsoever, can you? But we're not going to get into that. But some reviewers, I don't know, I mean, what their experience of video games was beforehand, actually labelled it the murder simulator. I mean,
Come on, man.
I mean, if you like,
It's great publicity, though.
isn't it just?
Amazing.
Because then everyone wants to see it and play it. Of course they do. I mean, it's easy to sit here now and go, oh yeah, but it's just, it doesn't like, there's no violence in it. It's only like, aliens getting shot.
Purple
Isn't it?
demons, yeah.
But then obviously at the time, you had the blood coming off. You had them kind of like, when you blew them up with a rocket launcher, they
I
kind of
suppose
like,
93, you're talking around the time when they had those hearings in America with Mortal Kombat.
Mortal Kombat,
yeah.
Night Trap,
That senator bloke,
yeah.
what's his name?
Well-
Kane?
Oh.
No. What was it?
We spoke about it, didn't we?
That senator
That'll
guy,
come
yeah,
to
I
me.
know. So
Cannon fodder and all that jazz. It was all in the news, wasn't it?
Yeah.
there was, and also it was well, loosely, and I again, you can go and look this up as a separate strand, as it were. But
Lieberman.
Lieberman.
Thank you. Joe Lieberman.
That's it.
Thank
He's
you.
got it now. He's woken up. But it was loose. Well, a lot of people tried to say that it was linked to the Columbine shootings.
Well,
yeah?
didn't they
That was
design
a good few years later.
They
a
made a-
level in it or something?
They made a
found- I
count.
think
No,
I
that's
did it-
later. They made a Counter-Strike level, didn't they? A map.
Yeah, because the Columbine
Something
was like
like that.
99.
No,
So
yeah,
a
I
few
think
years.
that's slightly wrong timeline, James.
Well,
Maybe they did play the Doom games, but
no.
honestly,
They what they were saying is they were saying that they drew experiences from that type of game,
Right,
from
yeah.
those games, and they actually specifically cited Doom
I'm just
as one of
remembering
the.
something weird. I think they either designed, they either designed the level of the school either in
they did. They redesigned
Either
the
in-
school in Counter-Strike map.
Counter-Strike.
that's-
Okay.
Yeah, Counter-Strike obviously was quite a bit later, but
We spoke about that in a separate podcast in the past.
yeah. But again, I could be wrong. I could stand to be corrected. But apparently they used to play this at length, and then people were like, "Oh, we put two and two together. It must be that video game. Then must be the fault of it." And obviously,
It's just because they're monsters, basically.
yeah. But that was the time when the whole violence in video games thing exploded. The whole kind of opinion and obviously that's pretty much been put to bed with various studies and things like that. So, chaps. Let's move on to pastures new, shall we? We're in the mid-90s. Quick look back at what we've mentioned here, and what you know is the genre as a whole. Should Doom be considered the most important FPS made? Should it?
Maybe.
Not could it? Should it?
Should it?
Should it be labelled the most important FPS?
Yes and no. Yes, in the fact that it completely opened up the genre to new players to experience this particular
Agreed.
type of game. Wolfenstein 3D started the wave, but Doom opened up the floodgates. But harshly, in a slightly harsh opinion, it's just a a lot glossier version of Wolfenstein 3D. It doesn't add too much extra on the bare bones of that game. I would argue, I'm going to say it, games like Duke Nukem 3D, although it's a bit jokey here and there, I think took it to another direction. You had landscapes that would explode. You'd have you could shoot up and down. You could jump around. And you could go up.
That's true, yeah,
I
the
personally
jumping.
think, even though I love Doom, I think it's maybe I'd go a little bit later on of the real definitive ones.
That's a fair assessment, I would say. Because we do. It does get mentioned all the time as a knee-jerk reaction to FPS. What is the greatest? The first FPS. Well, it's not the first.
It was just a glossier version of things had already been
Yeah,
done at the
I
time,
mean,
wasn't it?
Exactly. And I mean, in my opinion, it was the right game with the right ingredients that came along at the right time, and it kind of used existing technology, existing platforms, and I don't think there was anything wildly new. Yes, you had the different textures, the lighting.
When they
whatever.
did Quake with the fully 3D engine.
Ooh, Quake, you say?
But then I might have had more fun playing Rise of the Triad than Doom. And I feel a bit harsh saying that because I really enjoyed Doom. But Rise of the Triad, you could jump around platforms. It's more kind of interactive. The graphics were a bit. I don't know what you could have two. You could have two guns.
You could
have two guns.
double Uzis.
Dual wielding.
Dual
wielding.
You can't have
Guns
dual
akimbo.
guns in Doom.
Yeah, no, you can't. But it'd be interesting to hear what everyone sort of thinks
It's
on this
hard to
because
say though what's most important.
but this is the whole thing. It's a can of
The
worms.
best one, but is it the most important?
I don't think Doom progressed the genre. I think that's what we're saying, isn't it? It can't be the most
So then would you
important
say
if
that
it's not
Wolfenstein 3D is
progressed
the
it.
most important.
Yeah.
Most important.
It's more
And then
important.
everything just followed on from it.
Yeah, it's more important, isn't it?
Did it?
Wolfenstein 3D?
I think it goes back to what we said a minute ago, which was: did it represent a time where hardware was ready enough that studios could then start to really go to town on that genre? Because if we're saying, and I agree with you, in terms, the more money was better spent and made
Elsewhere, yeah.
in other genres. Certainly, the RTS was blowing up. Certainly the beat 'em up was strong, really strong up to that point, and further beyond that. And then you had the RPG games, all that sort of stuff coming out. So all the money was there, but the hardware wasn't there for the FPS because obviously it needed that graphical kind of leg up, didn't it? Because it has to paint the world as you kind of see it. So was Doom representing a kind of watershed moment for the hardware to say, yes, it was ready, or I don't know. I mean, this is one.
Maybe. I mean, you get again. It comes out December 93, 94 or 95 is when the 32-bit consoles come along,
Yeah.
and they were able to do
There you go.
FPS games.
So if they saw the horizon there with those coming out, you think, hang on, we've got some better hardware coming out here. It's a lot to think about there, a lot to unpack. But best thing to do there is throw it open to socials, I suppose. And if there's anyone out there who's got a bit of a meaty opinion on it, let us know. So
What you're saying is if they've got a boner for Doom. If they've got a boner for Doom, then get in
well,
touch.
you either have or you haven't. You've got 3 stages: bonus, semi, or none. And then but yeah, I mean, let us know what you think. It was or is Doom as influential and as groundbreaking as maybe?
What does BFG stand for then? Boner something?
big
gun?
Not big flaccid gun.
big plastic gun?
Yeah, we really just do what we want now, don't we?
We don't care. We like Ricky Gervais at the last Golden Globes. I don't care.
We don't
You
care.
did it.
Whatever.
So, so now we get up to the stage where I would say a lot of people would label this kind of coming period as the golden age of FPS games, which was kind of the mid to late 90s, and things really. When we talk about floodgates, it was just floodgates. So first on my list on the little whistle stop tour is a game called Heretic. Does anyone remember that?
Yeah, Heretic.
Loved Heretic. It was kind of like a magical Doom. So it was really enjoyable. They kind of took the whole wizarding world, made it a bit kind of gritty and dark, and the enemies were properly sort of butch and horrible as well. And it took the Doom engine and essentially incorporated a couple of extra bits. So it incorporated the ability to store and select items, which hadn't been done before. So you could pull from an inventory, and vertical aiming.
Yes.
We've had the horizontal aiming. We've now got the vertical aiming, which in many respects made it harder because you had to actually aim at the enemies rather than just kind of, well, maybe that direction will do. So you had a bit of a, tougher time there, but I think that was what was part of the draw. Really good immersive gameplay. I loved Hexen, and
I was going to say, was Hexen a sequel to Heretic?
Oh, sorry, Heretic. Hexen was the sequel.
Because
Yes.
yeah.
Heretic
Got
was
that
the
understanding,
first, and then Hexen came afterwards. Again, developed more. And I mean, they also introduced a few other graphical elements as well, and they really played on the whole light dark thing because you had a lot of levels that were very different in shading and stuff like that, and it looked really cool. But I played both of those until my hands hurt. So, but an interesting fact about these two games is that they had a feature called Gibs or Gibbs, GIBS. Anybody know what that stands for? I'm in the dev speak now. I'm in the dev speak.
Sounds like
Graphical.
No, well, it's to do with graphics, yes, but it's not. It's not as kind of technical.
Geometry. No, not.
Oh, now you've spoiled it. You see, you've ruined it now. Gibs is actually it's short for giblets. Funnily enough, now bear with me.
Okay.
And it meant that body parts or pieces of flesh could fly off an enemy's body if enough force was used to rupture it. So,
Wow.
i.e., if you threw a grenade or shot a magic spell that was to explode or whatever, that the enemy would literally blow apart into pieces.
Nice.
Yeah. And that kind of, yes, it drew criticism once again, because people were like, okay, this is getting a bit too much now. Most people loved it, of course, because it meant you could dissect your enemies in various different ways. And yeah, no press is bad press.
That was taken to another level on another FPS game called Kingpin. I don't know if you've heard about
I
this.
shall mention Kingpin.
Oh, you're going to? Sorry.
Well, we'll skate over it, but I'll come to you because I have a little story about that, about playing it around your house.
Okay, fair enough.
I don't know if you remember. But Apogee then Entertainment then gave us the gore-ridden Jib-filled. I can use Jib now, see, because I've told you what it is. Rise of the Triad in December of '94.
You love it. Adrian just loves it.
It's a great game.
Well-
it's fun.
It is good fun, and it's a bit crazy. It's a bit
played it. I've never played
It's
it.
so
you can
cool.
Jump around all the time, and shoot things, and
You must have it. You must have it.
Oh yeah, I've got it.
Yeah, you've got to
probably
play.
somewhere,
It's
but yeah.
it's really it's what I would consider like one of the cool shooters. Like it's a proper like adult kind of shooter. Isn't it?
Yeah.
It's really
I
gory.
like the look of it. It's different to Doom. I can't really explain why. It's kind of silvery and grey and jumpy, and you've got two guns, and you kind of
Yeah.
feel like you're Matrixy jumping around.
Oh, it's
causing havoc.
massively over the top, but
Yeah.
that's part of the appeal, I think. They really went to town on in-depth level design, and they used persisting bullet holes, so you could essentially shoot, cars and concrete in the floor and whatever, and the bullet holes would stay. That's right, yeah. Which was it doesn't sound that interesting, but it's like interactive scenery almost, which is a huge step forward. And you could also break windows, sheets of glass, etc. So things, destructible environments. So things were really ramping up for kind of the immersion stakes. They were really looking to get people dragged into the game. So Rise of the Triad was originally meant to be, believe it or not, a bit of trivia, a sequel to Wolfenstein 3D. Yeah, originally it was tabled as a sequel. But it was altered in its early development stages to just be a standalone game. So there we go. Yeah. Who'd have thought? Like,
I haven't played it for years, but I must give it a go.
I mean, how would you kind of link those? Well, you can't, can you really? But there we go. But hot on the heels of the likes of Hexen and Rise of the Triads, LucasArts was never too far away, were they? They were always fishing about. Yeah, bless them. And they wanted a slice of this cherry pie.
Oh, yes.
Of the
Yeah,
FPS
Guybrush
pie.
Threepwood has gone crazy.
He's gone mad.
He's gone berserk.
He's gone
berserk
nuts.
mode.
Your adventure, first person.
First person
Gum
insult
cannon
flying.
and stuff. Grog cannon.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd play a Monkey Island FPS game.
There we go. There's an idea tabled already. But there was, they had an engine that they used to use at LucasArts called iMuse, the iMuse engine, and they brought us Star Wars Dark Forces in 1995.
Good game, Good
Has
game.
anyone who's not seen it?
I've seen it. No,
I've
I've
seen
never
it.
owned
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
It's kind of, it looks a bit odd and a bit little janky, but it's like, I don't know. It's as good as they could have possibly got and as close as they could have got to playing one of the films at the time. And it's quite cinematic, but a little bit janky as well. It's kind of, I don't know. I haven't got particularly
Janky cinematic is the genre officially.
Yeah, janky
I
cinematic.
actually agree with that. The graphics aren't amazing, but it's a fun game.
Oh, it's
It's
don't
a
get me
fun
wrong.
game.
It's playing Star Wars. I mean, you know,
Yeah, you shoot the stormtroopers down. It's good.
yeah, and you can collect their guns as well, can't you? And you can use.
That's right. There was parts of it that were very clever at the time. I wouldn't say it's amazing, but it's good.
I'm probably being a bit unfair to it because it looks pretty decent. I just remember it being a little bit clunky, but maybe that was just my sort of 13, 14-year-old brain at the time. But it's quite a faithful game. In the graphics are very film-like, stormtroopers and other sprites and stuff. The movement's quite slick. It's quite dark in a lot of places. But yeah, I mean, that's just, you'd expect that from, as I say, they've got the hang of using the light and dark areas, so why not use the darkness a bit more? And we're now going to come to a game that was pretty much loved, hated, and caused controversy all at the same time. Adrian loves this one. And actually decided to wheel in a bit of humour into the genre, and it shed loads.
Yeah.
It peed a few people off. It got some headlines. There was a lot of controversy, but then people kind of loved it universally. Main character, blonde, chisel-jawed, foul-mouthed.
John Cena lookalike.
John Cena. Loved to blow up aliens and smoke a stogie whilst he was at it. Who am I talking about, Adrian?
Mr. Duke Nukem.
Indeed. And not just any Duke Nukem. What was the actual full game title?
Oh, what was it again? Duke Nukem.
I'm just looking for
3D.
the yes,
Yeah,
it was.
tricky there.
And why is it Duke Nukem 3D? Why did they have to put 3D on the end of it?
Because it used to be in 2D.
Yeah, well, it was. It was a
Platform,
platform.
I thought,
It
yeah.
was. There was a Duke Nukem
Good games,
1
actually,
and 2. And that was from 1996. And as I said, it is worth pointing out that it's the third installment. There were 2 previous games. 91 was the first game, believe it or not, and 93 was the second. 3D was by all accounts, as we said, a very different game. Quite an adult themed affair. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Even from the outset, the first level, which I remember very well.
I can replay the first one.
Come on, Age, give us a few of the naughty themes in the first level.
There's toilets. You can actually open the toilet door and find an alien in the toilet.
You can go to the toilet. You can flush the toilet.
I think there's a strip club as well.
Yep.
Like
There's
dancing. You can find a dead Doom guy body, I think, as well. Maybe
You
not
can.
the first level. Maybe it is. This is great. The pipe bombs are great.
Yeah.
Look, I don't want to. We've done a whole pod on this.
Yeah,
Love it. Beautiful game. I love how you can blow up certain walls as well, go through bits, and you can go up and down stairs. It's weird. You couldn't really do all that sort of stuff.
It was a lot more fluid. Again, we talk about it being like, we've got to be careful with like the word groundbreaker and stuff like that. What it did really well was take a lot of existing technology and used it to its potential, because the lighting's great, the enemies are funny, they're kind of like, you got pig like warthog cops walking around. Some of his one-liners are great, and I think one of the ones that sticks with me, funnily enough, don't take this as any indication of my character, but you got the little peep show screens, haven't you? Do you remember? Yeah. So you go to the booth, you press the button, and there's just like a woman in lingerie just dancing around. Like
Dylan right now.
I mean, can you imagine at the time, just absolute scandal? You can't have that. But yeah, that's what was going on in the game. And I mean, what Doom has started, Duke Nukem 3D was grew on essentially. I love the game. It's massively violent. The explosions are over the top. But if you want to hear kind of the real breakdown of it, listen to the pod. Listen to the pod, and you know where to go. So why was it so controversial? We've just talked about that pretty much. But I mean, it just once again moved the genre on. Maybe it had some bad headlines, but let's be honest, no press is bad press. No. You're going to go and play it because you want to see what the fuss is all about. So the game actually, it ran on something called the Build Engine. Yes. And it is, this is an important point. It's actually considered, Duke Nukem 3D is considered one of the last great sprite-based shooters. Because obviously after
still sprite,
exactly. So after that, it was more about the multiplayer side of things. It was
character models,
exactly. And it's kind of a little bit sad because you think, oh, okay, that part of the genre is dying. Yeah, because sprite-based shooters, they didn't have a great big window, did they? It was essentially the mid-90s. That was it. It was over in a flash. So unlike some other platforms that kind of went with it for years, they didn't have a much opportunity. So the swan song of the sprite-based shooters, many consider is Duke Nukem. So there you go. It won all sorts of critical acclaim. Consumers loved it for its dark humour and the fast pace and over-the-top gameplay. But it did come under fire for its persistent reinforcing of the male macho stereotype.
Yes, it did.
And the derogatory presentation of women,
yes,
in inverted commas, that was put in some of the headlines. But to me, thinking about it now, it is funny as hell. But it also, like, when you go through it and you play it, you do still kind of give a bit of an ooh or a cringe at some of the bits, don't you? Because you think, how have you got away with that? But maybe that's
it was the 90s.
It was the 90s indeed. And it was quite edgy, but I mean, Dill Keith, like final words on Duke Nukem 3D? Do you guys
I think it's great.
love it, hate
Fun
it,
game.
enjoy it?
You said it wasn't groundbreaking, but it was wall breaking.
Destructible environments.
Yeah, it's a fun game.
Yeah, it is a good fun game, and I fondly put that in sort of a definitely a top. What should we put it in? A top 10 or a top 5 of FPS of the 90s?
Oh yeah,
Definitely, it's up there.
my list. Yeah.
So, it's one thing really worth pointing out. Up until this point, the vast majority of FPS games were released for IBM compatible PC systems. Yeah, it was just a conveyor belt at this point, really, and nobody else got a look in. However, Macintosh released their first shooter back in '93. Believe it or not, they wanted a slice of the pie way back when, and they made a game called Pathways into Darkness. Heard of it?
No.
Nope. Didn't think you would have. I don't think most people have, to be fair.
Interesting.
It's a bit cheeky to put it as an FPS because it's an adventure game with FPS elements, but it is worth mentioning because it's kind of one of those first titles of that type to appear on a different platform because PC was just ruling the roost. And let's be honest, now, if you want a game, you don't buy a Mac. You know, it's PC all the way, or it's console, which we'll come on to in a minute, because I haven't mentioned consoles at all, really, have I? Right. And why haven't I? Because of the hardware. Yeah. So as our 90s juggernaut powers on, we come to a game which took the solid foundations of the likes of Doom and Duke Nukem, actually, and incorporated a brand new look and feel, using real-time rendered polygonal, easy for me to say, models in place of the classic little sprites, yeah? So this title also presented in a completely 3D environment and drove a huge additional following into LAN parties and player clans as well. Any ideas of what I'm talking about, chaps?
Quake.
Woo! Of course it's Quake. What
Quake.
else would it be? What else would it be? The massive Quake.
This is the one. I mean, you're talking about FPS now and FPS on the whole. Yeah, you can say, oh, well, the first guys were like pioneering. Blah, blah, blah. Quake.
It's funny because it's weird. It depends on who you talk to, where they sit on the kind of gaming fence. Some people probably wouldn't even give it a look in. They go, oh yeah, Doom was the first, Wolfenstein was the first, this was the first, that was the first. And they kind of then gloss over and then skip to Call of Duty, right? But yes, Quake was, when you think about it, is the epitome of a modern first-person shooter, yeah? And why? Why would you say, for those who kind of aren't in the know, why would you say that Quake is that another sort of watershed moment?
Because it's not sprite-based. It's like rendered objects. You control it in the way you do a current FPS, so full 360 movement, 360 aiming, and just yeah. Quake.
We've got to the bottom of the matter.
Quake.
But yeah, exactly what you've just says on the tin, to be fair. Loads of gory violence, crazy weapons, and a lot more intricate.
And it was
3D
fun,
levels.
actually. I think people are like, oh, Quake is groundbreaking. Fun game. Damn fun game.
It's made more fun by the fact you can literally just blow people apart with shotguns, rail guns, and all that sort of stuff. It is good fun, and it's again another quite dark presentation.
Very dark.
I love it gloomy. I love gloom.
Yeah, but
Do you like Gloom on the Amiga?
Oh, you haven't even talked about the Amiga FPSs. Let's save those for another lifetime.
another lifetime. Yeah. But it worked. The darkness and kind of grit worked because it was a huge success. Once again, John Romero and id coming up with the goods. And it was really the proper bona fide birth of standalone LAN events. This actually gave birth to QuakeCon.
QuakeCon.
Yes, QuakeCon. Again, we've said that previously RTS games... I don't know whether RTS games had yet had their kind of own cons. I think maybe they did. It made sense because obviously RTS games being the way they were. But yeah, this was when the FPS multiplayer really went on the map for LAN parties and actually their own paid events. Which is mad when you think about it. People, companies sponsoring to have a computer game played at an event. Now we kind of don't think twice about it. I mean, what was it I was watching the other day, just to go on a very quick aside? I was actually sitting there watching a Rocket League tournament. Yeah?
Yeah, I've watched some of those. It's
hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line for playing football with cars on a
Don't get me started on Rocket League.
How many of those players play with a keyboard or mouse? As I want to know.
Only Adrian. The only one who plays with a keyboard and mouse.
I mean, honestly, but you know, I'm zeroing in on Rocket League, but of course, you know, there's loads. I mean, look at the Call of Duty events, look at the Fortnite events. Look at there's like $1 million up for grabs. What is that for a game? It's madness. Anyway, going back to where we come to a bit of a turning point in the road, because up until this point, it's not fair to say it. You know, it's fact that PC was the dominant platform.
It was the bomb.
It was the bomb to play FPS games, yeah? Mainly because of the hardware, as we've already said. So the whole genre really was about to kind of have its doors blown off. And it was really by a console game, FPS.
A certain Jaguar game, even.
Oh, we had to shoehorn it in there,
Alien
didn't we?
vs Predator, right?
We move on to 97, chaps, 1997. The first significant FPS title to be released on a console. It gave us superb design. We could use stealth. We could get headshots. We had 4-way multiplayer. And we had position-dependent hit reaction. Okay?
Of course.
This game was so popular that it remained the biggest selling game in the United States for 7 years. 7 years it remained. What am I talking about?
Yeah, I like it.
Of course, I'm talking about GoldenEye 64. Again, funnily enough, we've got a pod on
We've
this.
covered it all.
But I mean, what is there not to say about this that we haven't already said? I mean, quick roundup, guys.
It's great.
We all love it. You know,
It's great. I've interviewed.
Keith's like, no,
I
not
sucked
for
at it.
me.
That's why I always used to lose.
Yeah.
I always used to lose when we used to.
Never-
it
never
was
played with
rock
Ross.
hard when you had people who knew what they were doing. Yeah,
Never play with Ross. Never.
No,
play
no,
with
Ross was
yeah.
Ross was good. Absolutely, but I mean, N64 very much put on the map by GoldenEye. How long had it been out by then?
What, the N64?
Yeah,
Not that long.
year
What,
or-
a year?
year or so, yeah.
96, wasn't it? Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that. So only a year into it, and it was already giving the PC a run for its money. Because I mean, I still can't. 7 years as a top seller.
That's crazy,
It's sat at the top of the charts. That's mental.
It's just so accessible. You didn't need a thing that was worth hundreds of pounds. How much did you pick? Your N64 was well dirt cheap, wasn't it?
£99, 99
£99, yeah.
with GoldenEye
You could-
included.
Exactly.
One or two.
I think I only had one. I had to get extras.
Oh,
I had to buy
4
extras.
controller ports ready for your 4 players.
So cool.
PCs were expensive in those
Yeah,
days,
yeah,
man.
they
Like
were. I
only
can't- yeah,
only
they
rich
are, yeah.
kids had the proper ones.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get I had the Amstrad. I had that for decades. But I didn't get I don't think we got a home computer till about 98, 99, something like that. Not
Same.
90,
Yeah,
some-
same.
round about then. But I mean, I remember playing GoldenEye around somebody's house. I don't think it was yours, Age. I think it might have been Ross's house actually.
Ross
Yeah.
had it. Rob had it on his. Rob had it in
Yeah.
64.
Probably,
Rich
yeah, around it.
as well. We used to play it.
I'm sure it was Ross's house because now you mention him being so good at it, I seem to remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It was always odd job.
odd job.
Always the headshots.
Yeah, I mean, we're hurtling towards the millennium now. 98. This is just, I mean, we're going on to kind of just heavy hitters galore here. I mean, I've just, apart from just listing them out, there's not much more I can do really. But 98 was another big year, and actually saw a release of a very, very story-driven FPS game that was very different to most that had come before it.
Which I would argue is the most important FPS game.
There you go. If you haven't played it, firstly, where have you been? And secondly, go and get it on. It has aliens. It's got a good selection of weapons. It's got good graphics. It's got a really good storyline.
What are you guys talking about?
What are we talking about? Adrian.
Half-Life.
Of course we're talking about Half-Life. By who? Who created it? Valve. The bit that gets me on that is they used to use the picture with the guy with the valve in his head. I was always like slightly disturbed by that. Tell her what's the Matrix. I was like,
Valve,
oh,
let
okay.
us some steam.
But yeah, if you haven't played it, get hold of it somehow and have a go.
I actually started playing the add-ons, the DLCs for it, like Blue Shift and all that. Like they had a few extensions. They already played them before.
They did.
They played the originals. They're pretty good. It still holds up. The graphics are old now, aren't they? But they're still good games within the Half-Life old universe. Love it.
Yeah, it's. I remember. I think I may have borrowed it from you at one time, and I was like, I kind of had to rework like how I thought about games because I hadn't played anything like properly story driven before. Certainly not like an FPS. Yes. And because most of them were a bit thin on the ground with plot, let's be honest. Mm-hmm. You know, you had a bit of a kind of a narrative, but it wasn't, you know. Whereas in that one, you had to talk to people, interact with units and people, and make certain things happen and revisit areas and stuff.
Yeah, NPCs and all that.
Yeah, about. Some of it was rock hard as well. Like when you had the mercenaries outside on the helipad or whatever, like firing at you. I mean, that was rough.
It was a hard game.
That was quite hard, but nevertheless, a really good game. And some of the aliens were nuts as well. But yeah, so despite the runaway success of GoldenEye on the N64, which we just talked about, the PC platform was still pumping out all the big titles, and there was beginning to be a little bit of a war rumbling between console and PC. Although that wouldn't really get going until the noughties. But Half-Life featured a really immersive, in-depth story-driven experience and that players not seen that before. Universally praised. For its attention to detail and the selection of weapons. GameSpot has it down as one of the greatest games of all time. Mm-hmm. Not just the greatest FPS, one of the greatest games of all time. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Whether you agree with that, you know, jury's out, but I think you'll get some people saying, you know, agree. But as we close out the 20th century, there were several more titles that kind of expanded on the graphics and speed. And as we talked about in the multiplayer pod, the thirst for kind of playing multi-person lobbies online was just growing and growing and growing. That's kind of all people wanted, to be fair. And more games geared their setups and gameplay to essentially that. And that's where the money was going. There was a game actually that probably gets overlooked quite a bit, called Star Siege Tribes. Anyone heard of that?
No.
It was released in 99, and it allowed up to 32 players to compete in a single match, and also featured team-based gameplay as well. So took what was already kind of out there, but really hammered home the multiplayer, and it was only multiplayer, online death matches and team games and stuff like that. But it gets overlooked quite a lot, mainly because you then had Quake 3 and you had Unreal Tournament released in the same year, which, you know, just obliterated everything in its path.
Unreal Tournament is a great game. So much fun. I mean,
QuakeCon grew with Quake 3 Arena, which was that one, and then Epic came along with Unreal Tournament. Again, geared massively towards the deathmatch modes, capture the flag, that kind of thing.
The vehicles. That I thought, well, this is great. Actually, just driving around in the different vehicles and stuff.
Which was another new thing
that
hadn't been seen before.
They did a little bit in Half-Life. No, that's Half-Life 2, my apologies. But yeah, there's little bits here and there, but nothing proper like that. So
no, and it was really taking some big steps forward. But this allowed huge lobbies of players to compete in varying online deathmatch and sort of capture the flag style modes, which are still featured in online deathmatch and things like that today. If you go on an FPS game today, you'll see capture the flag, you'll see deathmatch, you'll see all of those other modes and things on there. So and that's pretty much the thread that's carried on till today. I've also got a mention for Counter-Strike. I have to mention Counter-Strike from 99. Yes. Pretty much. I don't think initially, and again, I can't find a definitive answer on this. I don't think it was meant or was kind of seen to go very far. I don't think they had great aspirations for it. And it blew everything apart. There was at any one time, check this out, at any one time on the Counter-Strike servers, you had 90,000 players.
Oh, that's just mental, isn't it?
At any one time. You wouldn't struggle to get into a lobby, put it that way.
I'm not really a huge fan of online multiplayer FPS games, but Counter-Strike was the exception for me, one of the exceptions. I put many hours into it.
I remember playing that on your house when you had it linked up to the internet.
It's cool.
Yeah, I was like, wow, how is it even doing this?
I know, right?
Crazy.
But if you want to get good at Counter-Strike, you have to devote your life to it, because
we just get a kid. Oh, spawn, I'm dead.
Yeah,
spawn.
You got to duck. You got to do headshots, and you got to. It's so many little strategies and tactics.
Spawn and dead.
Dylan wasn't very good at it.
But then it's not for that one evening I played it at your house. Yeah.
But then there's you could probably say that about most modern FPS as well. And I'll come on to that in the sort of modern section. But we sort of come to 90,000 at any one time, and that apparently was a kind of an average. That's a lot of players. That's a huge amount of players. It'd be interesting. I don't know whether there's any numbers for kind of modern FPS games, but that's got to be up there. If So,
Kingpin story. I want to hear my Kingpin story.
Kingpin indeed. I do mention it sort of further down, but actually, So I remember because, like you say, you didn't used to play a lot of FPS games, and when you used to come around your house, you'd have sort of varying different titles on the go, wouldn't you? And I remember definitely playing like Resident Evils and kind of platformers. And things like. You had
different genres.
There was like a strategy game that was like Natural Selection. I remember that one. Do you remember that game?
That's an FPS game, really, but
it was kind of a management game though as well, because you had to like build things and stuff. But you had all sorts of games, but. Kingpin you had on the go one day, and I think Mike was playing it.
So bad.
I think Mike was.
It's a good game. It's interesting. Have you heard about this game?
Nope.
It's very interesting.
But it's essentially it's pretty rough. I mean,
mafia kind of mob, dark, dirty, kind of.
Don't you start out as as like a bum or something, or a thief or whatever, and you have to like work your way up by like killing people and getting money.
I think you have to become a kingpin, like
and you have to do various different things like nick cars and shoot people, and it was pretty rough. It was pretty gory and gritty. But I just remember it because again, it was one of those dark, like but quite realistic games, and it used like quite a cinematic sort of view, didn't it? The imagery was quite sort of cinematic. I was like, this looks a bit like unnerving.
I want to say late 90s. Early 2000s.
Kingpin, I think, was.
Are you talking about what's different about the game, or the kind of
Kingpin was 99?
99. There you go. Why it stood out and why it caused a controversy is you could shoot off different limbs. So a hand you can shoot off the arms,
like positional shooting.
So if you shoot the foot, they will fly off. So it's actually I don't think that really happened before in FPS games. If you got a headshot, maybe, but that's.
I think that you had the likes of like Hexen and Heretic, and then you had Quake. But I think that it was like a set kind of like the body would kind of there'd be like 4 parts it would go into,
and then you could shoot the leg further if you want to. It's disgusting. It caused a lot of controversy, that game.
Yeah, so there would be that. Well, yeah, exactly. It was more detailed, but I think there was only it went into like a few parts, whereas in Kingpin it was literally like 50 pieces you could shoot it into. But yeah, it was pretty gory. I seem to remember. I don't know. I quite enjoyed it though at the time.
Dark and gloomy, but yeah, it's a good game.
I quite enjoyed playing it. The final hurrah for the 20th century, and indirectly actually for the FPS genre, funnily enough, but it leads on to something really quite important, was at E3 in 1999. E3, for those not in the know, most people should be in the know. What's E3, chaps?
Big game show.
Biggest electronic,
massive
expo,
gaming kind of collection of kind of devs and companies, etc. But they showcased at E3 a real-time strategy game called Halo CE, which you probably wouldn't have heard of. The following year, the same game had been overhauled into a third-person shooter. So Halo, as we know it now, obviously, those may know, may not know, it started out as a pretty lowly real-time strategy game that didn't get any traction whatsoever. It then got overhauled into a third-person shooter, which didn't get any traction whatsoever. So it had 3 bites of the damn cherry, yeah? But both, as I said, both didn't get a huge amount of attention. Microsoft then decided they were just going to buy a company and went, okay, we'll buy Bungie, who created these Halo games. And they went, yeah, don't like it. And they said, I'm not going to, don't want RTS, and I don't want a third-person shooter. We want a first-person shooter. And they thought, Halo's a good name. We'll take that, and we'll create a first-person shooter. And what we'll do is we'll go one better. We'll throw it in the box with a brand new Xbox. Yeah. It was a stroke of genius because it was a massive, massive success. Halo is considered one of the absolute pinnacles of FPS of any age, of any era.
Indubitably.
Yes. I had kind of mixed feelings about Halo. I came into it on the second one. I didn't play the first one, funnily enough. And then I went back to the first one and then kind of saw what all the hype was about. And but the thing is with a lot of people, it is just like they see it as their mecca of FPS games, and rightly so.
It's definitely one of my favorite FPS games. Halo 2, I guess, and even Halo 1 is sort of.
I think you'll find if we did a poll, you'd get Halo 2 as being the runaway kind of success. Really,
it's amazing.
Most people.
Halo 2,
you agree?
I was going, yeah,
but yeah, because anytime I speak to anyone about that kind of those games, and Halo 2, God, I remember playing multiplayer or all this and online. And again, because it had so many vehicles, you could do various different shooting positions. There was like massive spacecraft, aliens. I mean, I remember some of the lobbies I were in. It was mental. You'd be playing with like God knows how many other players.
Like the sticky grenades. There's just so much to love about Halo 2.
Driving around in a warthog, just with the minigun on the back, and like trying to take down this giant building-sized alien. Yeah, it was really, really good fun. But that obviously paved the way for the sequels of the Halo franchise. And actually, oddly enough, they came back to the RTS genre some years later with Halo Wars.
Halo Wars,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Full circle.
Yeah.
We don't like it. And then, we do like it. So, one thing I've neglected to mention that I'm going to throw in, because there will be some handheld fanatics out there going, well, there's some FPS on handheld, you know. And you're right. There were. 2001, handheld market gave us a title for the Game Boy Advance. And it was a specific Game Boy Advance game only, FPS, called Backtrack. There you go.
No idea.
Nope, no idea. Doom was not long after that released on the Game Boy Advance as well.
Not a bad port, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty good report. Yeah, it's a pretty good report, yeah.
Not everyone's, those games, not everyone's cup of tea. Obviously, most people are playing those, that on PC. Not many people probably has heard of Backtrack because it was a GBA only release. I've no doubt there'll be some Game Boy Advance, pages on Insta that we follow that will say, yeah, we remember that. But yeah, due to the kind of small screen size, it was a bit challenging to play them. Obviously, a bigger screen is better. And with PCs, you can have larger monitors, etc., etc. But they were praised, in fact, for those types of games for pushing the hardware to its limit while actually maintaining a decent gameplay, which I think, to be fair, more credit to them, because it could have been a disaster. It could have been Adrian playing on his monitor with his little window, his little
Good old days.
his little graphic window. So the years after we went crashing into the millennium, loads more advances in graphics, story-driven gameplay, multiplayer options. They were just coming thick and fast. Games continued to draw in the masses. And we had lots of very lucrative franchises that began to sort of pop their heads out of the sand. One such, which was in 2001, called World War II Online. This was pre-Call of Duty, etc. This was pretty big. This was, again, an online multiplayer game set, as you would imagine, in World War II, which at the time hadn't kind of been done yet. No. So which is why it kind of struck a chord. Very popular at the time, but again was probably, the controllers were probably put down shortly after that because of so many other big games being released. Battlefield 1942 in 2002. The Battlefield series, as I'm sure most, or if not everybody, knows now. Very, very impressive. And the first Call of Duty game was way back in 2004. Believe it or not, a lot of people, consider, certainly sort of, I'd say, dare I say it, younger gamers would say that, Call of Duty was out in 2010 or 2000. Nope. The first Call of Duty game was, in fact, 2004. There was also a, I've got to give a nod to one of the earlier Call of Duty style, and I say Call of Duty style, this is the original Call of Duty, so the World War kind of games rather than what we see now. Anyone remember Medal of Honor?
I was hoping you would say that. Yeah. Medal of Honor games, I had loads of those.
Great
Rising
story.
Sun and
Frontline was my favourite.
Medal of Honor Frontline.
I had
D-Day
the PC
landings
ones
at the
with the 2 expansion packs on it, and
That was so impressive.
It was.
I played those Medal
I
of Honor
played it on
games.
PS2, and it was.
Yep. That was so. I remember getting that. I think Carolyn actually bought it for my birthday or something when we first started going out, and I was like, "What's this?"
Yeah.
I mean, just give us a flavour of the beach.
Well, it's like you've seen Saving Private Ryan, right?
Yeah. Exactly
It's like
that.
playing that. It was fantastic.
But with more success.
Yes, I left the beach with all 4 limbs.
Lucky
I was
you.
doing well.
Some of them didn't in the game, though. But yeah, it's
Great.
the sound,
It was really immersive.
and hiding behind the porcupines on the beach,
Yeah.
and like people running up the beach and all the bullets like coming off the sand.
Yeah. So good. So atmospheric.
That was a real first. That was a real first. But I had to mention the Medal of Honor franchise as well, and also because the story was pretty good. The way you had to like show your papers.
Yeah, you
Show me your
worked for
papers.
like the OSS or something, wasn't it? Like
That's
the
it.
Secret Service, and
That's it. And through the streets of France,
that's what was so good at Streets of France. But
Yeah.
then there's later missions where you're in Holland,
yeah,
and like
Operation
the
Market Garden,
yeah, the Nijmegen Bridge and all that stuff. Oh, it was brilliant.
Yeah, that is. I couldn't not mention it. But it's also worth noting, we talk about story driven, and again, another pod drop in there. We talk about BioShock. Woo! Great game. Story driven, massively immersive campaign. I mean, hop over to the old website and have a listen to the BioShock pod, because I really enjoyed that one.
And
Oh, don't worry, I've got an and. It's a huge
you got two
and.
ands.
It's in bold. And who did we interview?
well, we had
There's
two.
two. We can't forget one of them. That's not fair.
Paul
Hellquist.
Yeah.
Very great
Yep.
guy. Great insights to the BioShock.
And
Mr.
And
Mr. Levine himself.
Ken Levine. I mean, that's as much of an insight as you're ever going to need into a game. Interviewing two of the lead guys, and the fact that we've done a deep dive into the game as well. So I think Age, you hosted that one, didn't you, as well?
Keith,
kind of
we coded, didn't we?
I was co-host. Oh, even better. So yeah, but yeah, really enjoyed that, and it's again another one of those. Can we say landmark? I mean, it wasn't.
Yeah. You can. Yeah.
Can we?
Keith says so, so
Again,
it
in
is.
Keith says so, it must be.
I say so. In terms of the story and the world beyond it and everything, it was.
I
thought for an FPS, it was on a new level.
Impressive to a level
Yeah.
probably not seen before. So yeah, fair enough. But that brings us nicely to sort of walking through the rest of the noughties, really. And the vast majority of FPS games these days are either, unfortunately, sequels to existing games in franchises.
Half-Life 2, though.
Yeah, well, you are coming to that, aren't you?
Half-Life 2. Well, I was going to let you kind of jump in on that because you mentioned it, but I thought you were going to run with it. But yeah,
Right, yeah, sorry.
Well, while we're on it, then go on. Then
yeah,
where did Half-Life 2 kind of fit for you in terms of?
Really good. And to be honest, by this time, 2006, I want to say Half-Life 2. Am I wrong?
I think
Right?
it's 06. I think
don't
you're right,
know.
yeah.
But my point is, I was falling out of love with FPS games by this time. I kind of lost my love of Counter-Strike and meh. But Half-Life 2 was my final. I've had some great fun since with BioShock and stuff, but Half-Life 2 was my big kind of swan song, my kind of finishing note of FPS games for me. And I done all the add-on packs as well, the different episodes. Just a brilliant game. It took everything that's good about Half-Life 1, took the latest technology, latest ideas, and took it forward. So brilliant game, even better than the first one, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, I've read a couple of sort of different opinions. On the whole, praised massively for again, great story, great graphics, guns, etc., aliens. There's some people that say that they don't think it was as good as the first one, and that it maybe didn't do as well, for a whole host of reasons. But yeah, it's difficult to say really, because I've played it as well. It is a good game.
It's amazing. Yeah.
It's a great sequel. Because let's face it, there are some pretty awful sequels out there.
Yeah. Corridor 8, for example. I'm just-
Corridor 8.
was in development, apparently. I looked up.
We'll have to follow that one up. So, where are we then? So, sequels to existing games, or you've got standalone games that actually just essentially plagiarize the engines and the graphics used from other things. So they look too similar and they feel too similar, and that's a problem because you're not really playing a new game. You're playing something that's very similar to what's already out there. So that's not to say there aren't any great titles out there. I'm going to drop couple of names in. I mean, this will only be to certain people, obviously, that have played it. But Titanfall in 2014, anyone know of Titanfall?
I know of it.
Yeah, I had a little go of it.
Titanfall 2 on my PS Plus account, and people have raved about how good the single player campaign is.
So underrated.
I still haven't played it.
It didn't get a massive release. It didn't get a lot of press coverage, and it didn't even get a lot of pushing in like the relative stores. The PS Plus store and the Microsoft store. It really didn't get a lot. The initial Titanfall game. It is so polished and so good fun as well, and there's so much to it. And for those of you that don't know, if you want to give it a try, it's essentially you are. How can I put it? It's a very polished and sensibly balanced Call of Duty with mechs. So you can essentially deploy your mech, jump in it, tune the weapons, fire the weapons, and you can get out and in at any time. So it's very, very kind of free roaming, freelance type gaming. It's great. I mean, I played the first one, really good campaign as well. Very good campaign and a very good online multiplayer server. People are still playing in their droves now, 1 and 2 online. So if you want to get on and have a look online and get involved, and you can actually, and I thought this was really quite surprising because I played this with Steve originally, and we were like, we're just going to get hammered, we'll go on. It was actually the skill-based matchmaking is very clever. And you go on and you're quite competitive from your first match. You know, I mean, if you know how to play an FPS, you know, and you can get under the controls, you're actually quite competitive. You don't just get absolutely blown away by some of the other, you know, like
Counter-Strike with Dylan.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dylan.
There's also, I've got to give a mention because this is such a weird, funky game. Super Hot from 2016.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just very
best
quickly.
played in VR. That is.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Just very quickly. Why is it so different?
So it's almost like bullet time. So when people fire at you, if you don't move, the bullets don't move, or they don't move in an incredibly slow pace. But when you move, they start to speed up. But if you move slowly, they move slowly, and you can see the trail of the bullets as they're coming towards you. And you have so it's
You have to choose the right sequence to do stuff, don't you? And make sure that you aim properly when you shoot.
Yeah.
Well, it's a
But yeah,
a loved
PC
game.
first, wasn't it? But
Yeah.
playing it in VR is really, and when you do learn the order and stuff, you feel so cool. Dodging the bullets.
Are you like
I
throwing
am
the guns,
Neo.
throwing the guns, grab the other gun, oosh, grab that gun, boom.
It's got ninja stars in it as well.
Yeah.
And stuff.
Well, they can't. It's not people per se, is it?
No,
it's
they're
kind
like
of polygonal type.
They're almost like they made a glass because they shatter when you. Yeah.
So it's not violent per se, is it? It's not as a
it's not
classic
violence
FPS game would
against
be.
people, but yeah, and it's the world is really cool. It's all white.
Yeah.
And so the bullets and
Very
everything
crisp.
really stand out. It's really good fun, and if you can play it in VR, you must try it. It's
Super
so
Hot.
cool.
2016. 2016. Yeah. It's 7 years old already. But yeah, if you're not familiar, I mean, you know, I know there's loads and loads of others that, I mean, I've got some more I'm going to mention just very quickly in a list here, but there's loads and loads of others that, you know, I'm sure people absolutely love or love to hate and whatever. But yeah, you know, if you want to shout us on the socials, do so. But that kind of covers the main sort of whistle stop tour of where it came from, where it went to Maze War to, you know, PUBG to
Redneck Rampage.
Redneck Rampage. But I did want to mention a few titles, you know, through the ages that didn't get a shout earlier, just to satisfy a few more appetites out there. We had actually the Terminator in 1990. Anyone know that one?
in 1990.
I don't know.
Yeah.
No, I played Skynet, but that's different, isn't it?
It was a very basic Terminator game in 1990. Xenomorph, 1991.
Heard of it?
Yeah.
Haven't played it.
RoboCop 3D, 1992.
Well, that's a great game in the
I've
Amiga.
not played it, but it's really impressive looking, isn't it?
Really cool
Yeah.
game.
Space Hulk in 1993.
Yes.
I had Space Hulk. That
had-
did not run great on my
I
Amiga.
had it on the Saturn.
It was
Saturn
quite
version was
thirsty.
pretty good.
Yeah.
It's
You know, on the
hard.
Saturn, it was rock hard.
hard.
Yeah, because it was tactical as well.
Yeah,
Because
like
you had,
the
I
war
think,
game.
3 or 4.
You had the Hulk
Marines,
guy. You had 3 or 4 of the Hulk
Yeah, it was
guys.
different
Yeah,
to normal.
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
tough.
Alien Trilogy,
Before you
1996.
get there, do you remember
Yep.
Corporation
Yes.
on the Mega
I
Drive?
had
Was that on the
Corporation on the
Amiga
Mega
as well?
I don't know, but I only had the.
It was
I
on the
only
Mega.
had
That was first.
It looked like
person. It was
Blanca's
3D.
face, didn't it, on the cover? That green
Yeah,
monster.
like a green
You didn't
monster.
know what you were
remember
doing.
it.
You were
Yeah,
like,
do you remember
bloop, bloop, bloop.
Corporation?
Yeah, Corporation
Virgin
or
Games,
Cybercop,
wasn't
wasn't
it?
it? It was
I haven't-
Cybercop
I haven't.
Corporation.
Yeah.
And you like go boop boop. Am I doing anything? Boop
Yeah,
boop
you
boop.
just
Nothing's
walking
happening.
around,
Oh, I'm dead.
yeah.
Something just
Yeah,
killed me.
That's one.
Oh,
I
great.
remember from those days.
Okay, mister, I'm no good at video games.
Alien Trilogy.
I'm terrible at video games.
Shut
what are you
up.
talking
Stop
about?
talking.
Alien Trilogy, brilliant.
Alien Trilogy.
Had that on the Saturn.
Absolutely. Terminator Future Shock in 1996.
That might be what I'm talking
Not
about.
played that
The PC shooter.
Yeah, I remember this one vividly because I bought this over in the US. Actually, I was over there. We were seeing some family friends for a holiday, and I went to like a computer shop or whatever, and I said to the guy in there, "I've got this PC. Like, will it run, etc." Because console stuff, no. PC stuff, yes. As long as it's IBM compatible, it doesn't matter. Yeah. So I bought a couple of games, like dirt cheap, like versus over in the UK. I was like, this is wicked. And I bought Terminator Future Shock. I played that to death. It was so hard.
Yeah,
It was so difficult. Like, and there were so many like gaps you had to jump over and like stairs and things like that. And if you fell, you were done, you know. So, yeah, it was rock hard, but I really liked it. Redneck Rampage 97.
Yeah, it's a fun game.
Which was mental, and it has a great soundtrack by a guy called Mojo Nixon, who is slightly unhinged.
Well, you're at 96, 97.
Yeah.
Power Slave or Exhumed, as it was known.
Exhumed,
over here.
yeah.
Exhumed, yes.
That came out on everything, I think.
They put it on the Switch now, haven't they?
Have they?
Exhumed, I think you can get like a remastered version
That's
on
really
the Switch.
cool. Again, I had just because that's the console I had at the time. I had it on the Saturn. It's ancient Egyptian themed. And that was really cool because it had lots
Yes.
of backtracking and exploration. So you'd have to unlock certain things or find things, and then you would go back to different levels to get to, because you'd have powers that would enable you to get to different areas and stuff like that.
It's funny. It's funny you say that actually, because I'm pretty sure I mentioned this during the Amstrad pod, but now it's ringing a bell again, and I cannot remember the name of it. But there was one very similar to that was on the Amstrad in, I think, the might have been late 80s, maybe 1990 or something like that. And it was specifically like an Egyptian themed. You had to go into pyramids.
Yeah, that's what this is.
I don't know whether it is. I don't know whether it was. It might have been exhumed, but I can't remember. But it was. Yeah, it was quite cool actually. It was quite a cool game. A bit janky as you can imagine.
Yeah,
but, yeah. I think. Yeah, I seem to remember that it may have been exhumed actually on the.
But no, this on the Saturn. It would.
That would have been a better version, probably.
It looked excellent, and the lighting and stuff. And it was made by a company called Lobotomy Software, and they were the company that ported Duke Nukem 3D and Quake to the Saturn as well.
Did you start
They
out with
did
like a
good job
plane?
as
Was
well.
there a plane there, and you landed in a plane, and then you had to go and explore?
Possibly. I'm trying to remember now.
You have to look that one up because that's ringing all sorts of bells.
That's a great one.
Adrian, Turok, 1997.
Turok.
Whoop whoop.
Yeah,
More interviews.
yeah. I'll be honest, it's not my favourite FPS games, but they're N64, aren't they? They're
Yeah.
playable, they're fun. I never really got to full grips with it because it's quite tough, actually. But yeah, I've interviewed a couple of fellas that worked on Turok games. Turok. They made Walker as well, so interesting pathway to those games. But there you go.
yeah.
And they also made the FPS South Park game as well on the N64.
Oh god, yeah.
Oh man.
Just a note on Power Slave Exhumed.
Yeah.
It's on everything. It's not just
Hey!
on Switch. They're basically that remastered version is on everything.
Oh,
so go and
excellent.
enjoy it.
Go play
and
it.
enjoy
Nice.
Go have a go. We mentioned Kingpin Life for Crime 1999, and there's a bunch of other stuff that we may or may not have mentioned. Is there any other names that's coming to mind that you want to throw out?
Let's see. Are we spoken enough about Alien versus Predator?
Oh, we've barely mentioned it.
It's a different sort of FPS game. It's a good game, It's more of a survival. You can't just go guns a blazing. So it's clever.
Unless you're the
Predator, I think.
No, the shooty guy.
Space Marine.
Yeah, I was more gung ho with that guy.
You were
than
more gun high, but it's
than
just
with
Still
the
find
Predator.
ammo and stuff.
yeah, it's tough game actually, but clever game.
Yeah,
I like that a lot.
pretty good.
Alright,
FPS.
cool.
Alien Trilogy is great.
Yep.
Yes.
Just like highlights.
See, I found Alien Trilogy boring because obviously there's a lot of time that you just like wander around with
Controversial.
nothing going on.
But
I'm like, I like to be entertained.
okay.
as you know.
It's very atmospheric though. It does
It is
nail
quite
that
atmospheric.
atmosphere.
It does.
But yeah, I know what
when
you
one
mean.
of the face huggers or something comes out of the,
Because
like
you've got the scanner and
it's like so, it was a bit like that.
it did nail the atmosphere, but I know what you mean. It can.
Let's
some of the
touch
levels
on
can get a bit-
the brief attempt to make FPS games on the Amiga. I'm guessing
Please do. No,
you've not
please do.
covered it there.
Yep. No.
So, being a man with only Amiga and no means to actually get a PC, there was this clamour that was like, oh yeah, we got to try and get this stuff on Amiga. But the problem is with stuff like Gloom, and there was something called Fears.
And there was also Alien Breed 3D.
Alien Breed 3D.
Tower
So
Assault.
I had all of them, right? But I had to, again, play them on a postage stamp because it was you basically like an unexpanded A1200, which was like one of the big, the ones towards the top end of the range. Wouldn't play them. But see, only now can I enjoy them properly. I was like, oh yeah, I can play Fears.
Well, you got better
full
glasses now, so you
speed. I'm like, oh, this is gonna Alien Breed 3D is gonna be so good. They are rubbish. They are terrible. Even if you'd be like, if you had a bumped up Amiga in those days, expecting something like Doom, you'd be so disappointed. They are so bad. Breathless, I think was another one. But yeah, thanks a lot for that. Anyway, thanks for trying to get us FPSs on Amiga.
Well, they tried.
People really did try.
They really wanted it.
But there you
wasn't,
go.
Wasn't.
It's worth popping in there as well, and I didn't give it its own dedicated section because it doesn't control the same as an FPS, but technically the viewpoint is an FPS, and it was obviously light gun games.
Yeah.
The likes of Time Crisis, Virtua Cop, all that sort of stuff, which we all know and love.
Are we going to do that? Are we going to do that before we finish?
Are we talking light gun? Shall I leave it well alone?
Leave it alone.
I'll leave it alone. Well, I
could
purposely
talk
left it
about-
alone
we
because
could talk some more
it is
about
like it's a light gun game. I don't think it's not referred to as a first person shooter in the typical sense of the way you control it. But you could argue either way, I suppose.
I think regarding light gun games, we'll wait a little bit longer to get to the bottom of
We got to
the
get to the bottom
matter.
of the matter. So, to round things off, chaps, I'm going to give you the biggest sellers of all time in the FPS category, and I would like you to give me some numbers, please.
3.
In yes, you win. Have another freeway cola. If I'm doing top 5, so 5th place,
Other colas are available, sorry.
they are, but are more expensive. In 5th place, we have Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 from 2011. What do we have in terms of unit sales?
60 million.
16. Oh, that's quite good.
Did you say 16 or 60?
16.
No, I said 60, but no one say 16.
He said 60.
Oh, 16.
No one say 16.
Okay, I'll take 16. Yeah.
Modern Warfare 3. I'll go 28.
Ooh, 28 deal. 16, 28 mil.
Say 60 just for fun.
He's not going to play the game. Or is he going to play the game?
I'm not, no.
I'll tell you. 26.5 million.
What?
Yeah, 26.5 million. Well done, Keitho. Right,
Sorry,
position
everyone deafened by me going, what?
Position 4. This talk about curveball. And it is a light gun game.
Oh, James,
What is
naughty.
it?
Duck Hunt from 1984.
What?
Are you
No.
are you enjoying, well, are you, because it came with the NES console, didn't it? So you're including bundled, oh God.
Here we go. That's the whole can
That's
of
way
worms.
more than 26, isn't it?
No.
No?
Nope.
27.
28. 28 mil. Third place, another Call of Duty, but 2019's Call of Duty Modern Warfare. 30 million.
Wow.
Number 2, Overwatch from 2016.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, people love
Yeah, I played it a bit.
Never played it. Don't even know anyone that plays it, but apparently there is some kind of massive community that plays this game.
Millions, mate.
Oh, yes, and the rest, yeah. So if COD in 2019 is 30 mil, Overwatch in 2016, 35 million. And number 1, anyone want to guess what the number 1 online first-person shooter game is?
Online.
And again, this is it's partly a cop-out actually on this list. I got this list from somewhere on the internet, and I'll tell you why in a minute.
Fortnite, that's why.
No,
That's third person.
That's right.
that's
Right, you're
exclusively third person.
right. My bad.
Is it another free-to-play one?
Yeah.
Is it Apex Legends?
Nope.
It's not PUBG, is it? It's PUBG.
Yes, it is.
It's
Oh,
PUBG.
I thought that was third person.
Nah.
PUBG's free to play, isn't it?
It is free to play, and it comes with a full FPS
Oh, I thought it
version.
was-
You can play the
thought it was
game in
third
either.
person,
So,
like Fortnite.
like I say, it's a bit of a cop out because it's
Yeah.
got 2 options. So you can play the game as first person, or you can play the
Okay.
game. And the difference is that if you lock into one of those lobbies, you stay in that view.
Yeah,
So
I would
you
think
can't.
so. Yeah.
you
Can't
can't
jump
just
between.
no.
It's
exactly.
a different kind of
'Cause-
aiming.
yeah.
Like, yeah.
2017, which has sold upwards of and continues to grow upwards of 75 million units.
But that's it. A lot of people have just got the free version,
That's it.
not
They've
paid any
installed
money
it or
towards
whatever
it.
and never
But
played it. Yeah.
but there's an awful lot of off the back of that as well, because I knew you'd say, because it's free to play. It's free to play.
Yeah.
It's actually one of the most spent on games as well in terms of add-ons, transactions, etc., etc. So
Oh, I'm not doubting it makes money.
yeah, it makes money hand over
it makes
fist.
money.
But yeah, there's I think there's always room. I like a modern FPS. The only problem with modern FPS games that I find is that you kind of have to play them from day one, and you have to kind of get good at them. There's no way you can play it with other people and not just get absolutely owned if you haven't spent hours on it.
This is it, right?
And,
I think
and that's the problem for guys
the
like
glory
us.
days of the solo player are gone, right?
But
Or-
we've got all these releases. GoldenEye had a massive success relaunch on
the Switch
Xbox and various
online.
other platforms. That was
good.
I played it actually. Yeah, I've got it in my membership. It's good. They've the graphics are a bit smooth. It's not a huge reimagining, but it's good. It's well done.
I think they've done the right thing with it, though.
I just found it hard to play without the proper N64 controller. Like, why is my gun shooting up here?
But it's things like that. Why have they re-released something like that? And why is it done well? That tells you that there's still the market.
As you know, I've never played FPS games online because I suck at FPS games.
Yeah.
But I do enjoy story-driven ones. So over the years, there's been a lot.
Yeah.
We haven't mentioned it. I really like Killzone.
Killzone, yeah, great game.
Time Splitters.
Time Splitters 2.
Black.
Oh, yeah,
There's
God,
loads
yeah.
of good ones.
Yeah, there's some really.
Like I say, the list is endless.
There's some really quirky ones from that time as well. There was one on the PS2. I was on PC as well. It's called The Operative. No One Lives Forever, which is like a 60s set one, and you play as this female spy, and it's got a very like Austin Powers look to it. And you carry out lots of like spy missions and stuff, and it's actually got stealth elements in it as well. It's really cool, and you could probably pick it up for pennies.
Yeah,
now.
there's. I mean,
Perfect Dark. I'll keep going.
Perfect Dark.
Yeah,
Perfect Dark. I mean, there's Duet X as well. Do you remember Duet X from the PC?
Yeah.
Remember that one? Again, another massive step forward in graphics and gameplay and stuff like that. There's like Syndicate started out actually as an FPS, and then went to Syndicate Wars later on, which was a RTS.
Did it?
I think.
Did Syndicate ever have a first person?
There was a version
game?
of.
Possibly.
Not the
don't
Amiga
really-
Syndicate.
Amiga Syndicate. Syndicate is just a
There was
geeky
an
RTS
FPS
one.
shoot game later, wasn't there?
Yeah, I think they might have done one.
But I think it was poorly received.
Yeah, it wasn't.
As in,
great.
go back to doing what you do best, guys.
But it just gives you another strand to that whole, a lot of those games either started out as platformers or, went back to being strategy games or whatever. But yeah, there's so many. I mean, I'm going to get shouted at, from people saying, you didn't mention this game.
I've like, a couple of the original Call of Duty Modern Warfare and Modern Warfare 2.
Yeah.
Because they remastered them, didn't they?
They did.
I've replayed them. They're amazing. The single player campaigns, I've never played them online. The single player campaigns are so immersive.
It's like when you're storming these big government buildings and you're out in the, and it's just like,
the mission in Pripyat as well. That's fantastic.
50,000 people used to live here.
Yeah, and you're doing it in the ghillie suit. Oh, it's so cool.
Yeah. Very, very cool. But yeah, so chaps, Whistle Stop. We've mentioned probably quite a few, couple of hundred titles now, I'd imagine. There's loads more to talk about. There's loads more obviously out there, but we've looked at kind of where it came from and the fact that Maze War with its little funny green lines and, clanky bits and pieces actually grew into other things like Battlezone, which was amazing, grew into your Dooms and your Wolfensteins, and then, the stuff that we kind of love now.
Destiny, that's one the kids play.
Destiny's another one.
I've never played it.
Destiny's another one. Yeah. They're just going to keep coming out, aren't they? It's going to be like Tourette's. Yeah. But yeah, it's I quite like the genre. Again, I'm not great at it.
Oh yeah, it was like a
Fallout.
I suppose that's kind of like RPG.
It is because it's not. Yeah, it's
Fallout.
I suppose like you could say Cyberpunk as well because that's the most of the gameplay is first person shooting.
Yeah.
But it's like an RPG as well.
Right, okay.
So it's Fallout.
Yeah. We could keep going all night, couldn't we?
Like you said, is it up next to like sports games?
I've tried to exactly. I mean, I've tried to keep it as close to the definition of the genre as possible. You could add all sorts in there because there's tons of other games that straddle adventure FPS or whatever. I've mentioned a couple, but if I start going on about the rest, we'll be here all night. But so I'm glad we got through that list. I'm glad we looked at the development of it, and I'm interested to have learned
very nice
where it kind of came from, where it went to. So thanks for your company, chaps. Thanks
you
for listening, everybody.
And
I hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you on the next one. Adios.
thanks for listening to today's podcast. We really hope you enjoyed it. You can tweet us at Arcade Attack UK. We're also on Facebook at facebook.com/Arcade Attack UK. Check out our website at arcadeattack.co.uk for lots more retro gaming goodness and to delve into our archives. Our podcasts are also available on Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, YouTube and Apple Podcasts. Please leave us a review and a rating, we'd really appreciate it. If you'd like to support Arcade Attack, please check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/arcadeattack, which will give you access to exclusive podcasts, interviews and other bonus content. So, until next time, take care and we'll speak to you soon.